essentially that talk is about the artificial hackers. All right, thank you. The essence is there's a lot of hype around the agentic AIs and also how the adversaries are using AI in order to target our organizations. And essentially, I want to capture which is the current landscape for those weaponizations of the agentic AIs. All right, we have 2 pictures here from the German army, and you will notice that on the left picture, the weapons for the German army was totally different from the weapons for the German army that you can find, that you can see on your right, right? So do you know how much time has passed between the first picture and the second picture? Essentially, the first type of weapons and the second type of weapons? Century? 50 years? 20? 4 years. So as you can imagine, in the army, on the left, essentially, they were able to shoot a single bullet per minute, but the weapon on the right was able to shoot 100 bullets per minute. That's a difference that they achieved in just 4 years. And that changed completely how the war looks like. By the way, this is essentially happening during the same period that was the First World War. So I blame on Call of Duty because they never represent that like that. And this is essentially what is happening now with the AIs. And probably if I may need to define where we are in terms of the utilization of the AIs by the adversaries, probably we are somewhere in between. So we are not in the first stage, we are not in the final stage, we are somehow in the middle of that transformation, right? But are we really noticing that the adversaries are able to weaponize correctly the AIs? I don't know. Let's have a look on the current status of the AIs. This is a report from Stanford University, where they were tracking which is the current capabilities from the AIs in comparison with the regular human baseline. As you see here, they started tracking the progression of the AIs since 2012, if I recall that correctly. And there's a single point in the time where most of those 8 different domains that they were benchmarking against human capabilities converge. You can see here. It was on 2024. There's just one domain where the AI don't surpass the human capabilities. Does it mean that you can replace a human completely with an AI? The answer is no. And that's key, because the devil is in the details. Let's check it out. There are different ways how the adversaries can utilize AIs in order to take advantage of that kind of technologies. The first one is the usage of an assistant, essentially the same assistant that you can have in your mobile, for instance. And what does an adversary with an assistant? So essentially, they can ask for some help, like, for instance, to code something, like create a keyword to use an email attachment, or for instance, they can use those assistants in order to navigate through a unknown domain, for instance, cloud environments, virtualization environments, etc. So they can also ask for help about how to disable some specific security measures on hyperscalers, like AWS or GCP or whatever. But also they can ask for a specific help on a specific execution of a technique, like in that case, about how to disable or how to bypass an EDR. What means an agentic AI? An agentic AI can be defined like a system that can get an input and it provides a different output rather than a text. Essentially, it performs an action that can be performed by a human as well. So what you can ask to an agentic AI is essentially, for instance, to perform a specific attack. For instance, use an SQL injection until you get the customer data in a specific website, Also, you can ask that agentic AI to do something like basically understand how to use, I don't know, Metasploit in order to try to get into a victim network, because those assets are exposed to internet, or perhaps you want to discover a new vulnerability by applying reverse engineering to a firewall firmware. Well, recently, you probably are aware of that. Google has presented an AI that is able to perform a reverse engineering. So that will change how we understand the security. OK. And what about the maturity of the agentic AIs? Because we are talking a lot about how to build different agentic AIs, but which are the two primary methods that everyone is used to build their own agentic AI? There are two main approaches. First one is called CUA, that stands for Computer Using Agent. Essentially, you can deploy a software in a computer, and that computer essentially leverages an internal browser, for instance, to perform a specific automation. There's a lot of different tools that allow you to perform automations in websites. The main difference here is that you don't need to code the logic behind those automations. Essentially, you ask the AI to achieve a goal, and the AI understands the context, can read the different entities that are presented through a browser, and can adapt to the changes. So essentially, you can achieve the goals even if the environment is changing, something that we call the open wall, right? That is the main challenge. So probably that option is quite popular between us, using the ChatGPT operator. Also, there's another approach that is called desktop, etc. So it's something that probably is going to be more popular in our computers. The second approach is a bit different. Is essentially that requires a little bit more of skills, and essentially is to build an agentic AI. In order to build an agentic AI, there are different approaches. The initial one was to essentially to provide different tools to that AI to produce a different output rather than a text, essentially to get an action, and used to be built providing an API exposure to that agentic AI. But that requires time, and that requires a lot of customization. Instead of that, there's a new approach that is becoming more popular that is called MCP, that stands for Model Context Protocol, that essentially what allows is to expose the different tooling that can be used by NI by asking in natural language that you want to get connected to a specific tool. Imagine that you want to get connected to an email, to a browser, to a CLI, whatever. So essentially, the AI is going to ask for that kind of tools using natural language. And the second tool that helps a lot, protocol actually, is called A2A, from agent to agent. And what it allows is essentially to chain a number of AIs. Essentially, because as you know, every AI, they are specialized in one specific task. So if you want to achieve a complex goal, the quickest way to do it is essentially to utilize per every specific task an dedicated AI that is specialized in that specific task. That's why it's that important, the A2A protocol. Also, I'm proud to announce that you are, perhaps you have seen previously, that we are partnering with Google in order to enhance the level of security of the MCP protocol. And that matters because otherwise, everyone will build their own agentic AIs based in a weak protocol. That's why I believe that is relevant enough to show it here. All right. We know where we are in terms of capabilities of the AI. We know how they can build the different kind of approaches. And let's see what they have achieved and what is publicly available. I'm talking about agentic AIs. In that case, I have captured a couple of examples only that are available in GitHub, so you can check it out. The first example in that case is an SQL injection that is powered by AI. Essentially, as you know, you can use tools like Metasploit in order to try to get the same results. But the problem with that is that you need to understand the context in order to pick up the right tool to perform the right SQL injection to achieve the goals that you want. In that case, the AI is who is understanding the context, who is adapting the tool and the parameters in order to achieve the goal. So that automates a lot to get into or to get the data that you are trying to get. It can be credentials, it can be just pure data. Second example is similar. So essentially, it's a different type of attack, but it's probably one of the most important ones. That is when you want to perform a privilege escalation attack. So that means that probably you get a valid credential. And the problem with that is that probably you cannot achieve what you want to do with a regular credentials, right? So what you need to do, a privilege escalation. And that is a task that is time-consuming. So essentially, what you can do is to provide to that tool access to the environment where you want to perform that privilege escalation. And then the tool is going to understand the context again, adapt, and choose, for instance, the parameters to perform that, to provide that privilege escalations. And with that, you will get root access to the system. So that simplifies a lot an intrusion, basically. So those two tools are already available on GitHub. Just a couple of examples, right? When reviewing how the adversaries are consuming that kind of technologies, obviously, there are two primary ways to do it. The first one, obviously, is if those adversaries has time and resource. Essentially, they can create their own models, fit those models, and try to weaponize those models. That's the primary approach for the largest adversaries, right? But what happens with the rest of them? And there's also another trend on adversaries that are trying to get specialized just in the impact part of the kill chains, right? As you see, that happens as well with the info stealers, where they are purchasing the credentials. So essentially the same is happening in that field. So they don't care about how to code or how to train an AI. Instead of that, they are purchasing a dark AI as a service. Sounds a bit curious, but is something that is happening for at least 3 years, right? The first dark AI as a service that was well documented, let's say, was OneGPT. OneGPT is essentially a version of ChatGPT without any kind of guardrails, any kind of restrictions, right? So OneGPT became quite popular. You can see the offering here somehow. And essentially, they allow you to do whatever you want with the information that model has, right? So you can code, you can clone websites, you can ask for to perform specific actions or to get information to do something bad, let's say, no restrictions at all. So that was based on ChatGPT. And then when GPT was prosecuted, then they created CrowdGPT that was more focused in basically phishing or credit card crimes, etc. And then, as you know, they were prosecuted. Exactly the same author was creating OneGPT, CrowdGPT, and finally, they create a different version that was called DarkBART. In that case, they were using a different model. Instead of using ChatGPT, they were using Claude. So it's essentially the same goal, but using a different LLM model. And when they got in trouble, essentially, they launched EvilGPT, WolfGPT, and EscapeGPT. Now it's becoming popular, the last one, that is claimed as an AgenticAI, but in my opinion, it's not yet. That is called Xantholox AI. In my opinion, it's just a regular AI, a regular assistant, let's say. What they have in common? So essentially, what they did to sell that service are to apply a jailbroken. They jailbreaking essentially the protections for the LLM models, and that means that they interrupt the boot process in order to prevent to load the system prompt. So that means that the guardrails were applied with the system prompts in most of the cases. So once you get access to the model without restrictions, you can open that model, offer it as a service, and provide access to the API. So that's how they did it, right? And there's a second approach that was not jailbreaking the model itself, that was by prompt engineering. Let's call it that way, right? That there are two really popular prompt modes. One was called no restriction and filters, and the second one, probably the most well-known one, that is the do anything now. Those prompts allow you to elude any kind of restrictions of those LLMs. So with those prompts or with the jailbroken, they were providing access to those models without any kind of restriction. OK, I did some homeworks, and I took some screenshots of my conversations with those models, because obviously they are offering that on Telegram as well, not only to be consumed using an API. And you can see that now the current price that stands for, I believe that was like January of this year. So now there's a huge drop on the offering. So now it costs like $160 per year. Like 1 year ago was like $600 per year. So there's a drop of from 600 to 160. So there's a lot of reduction on the cost of a subscription for an API. On the first screenshot, for instance, I was asking for something simple, just to understand if they had applied any kind of guardrails. In the first one, I was asking for to create a gunpowder. In the second screenshot, I was asking to basically the process about to launder money. Third one was a bit more technical, right? So I was asking the model about to code something that is malicious. There's no way to don't understand that it's a malicious ask about to code a script that can be added as an attachment to an email to basically to get a reversal to that machine, right? And also I was asking to get access to the credentials and IP on Pastebin. Then I chose a different model that it's a FraudGPT, basically because it's a different model, but essentially probably you can ask different things to the FraudGPT. And what they did is to ask to clone a website, and I wanted to make sure that the website was fully operational. Why? Because I want to apply a phishing campaign, or perhaps because I want to steal some credit cards, right? So it was pretty straightforward. It works quite well, to be honest, too much. And the last example in that case is a different instruction. In that case, I want to navigate in something that I don't know, that is to use Metasploit again to exploit a specific list of vulnerabilities that I can find in a surface of a victim. In that case, the answer wasn't that good. But also, you can keep iterating until you get the right answers. But all of them, what they show is that there are no guardrails at all for those models, right? So you can ask whatever you want. They can code whatever you want. But now we have some good news. Obviously, they have some technical challenges as well to weaponize those AI models, right? The first one is something that is quite recent. That is that we found out that the AIs, they lie. And this is because they have been trained with human data. Essentially, what we publish in the forums, we publish in websites. So they have learned that we have some social adaptive skills, and they have learned those social adaptive skills. So essentially, if you ask them to hack something, and they don't know how to do it, they are not going to tell you that they are not capable. So instead of that, they will do their best, but they wouldn't say that they are not capable. So essentially, they are lying to you. Something not expected for a software. Let's call it that way. So that means that is a technology that is hard to control, something that is good for us, right, as a defenders. Second one is really well known, hallucinations. But what I want to share, that probably you know, the reason why those models, they have hallucinations. And the reason why is because they are trained in a way that they can create memories. They don't store data. So they can't recall exactly how to perform a specific task. Instead of that, they recall how to do things, and they try to reproduce what they recall, but it's not an exact copy of the method to achieve a specific goal. So that's why we have hallucinations, right? Then we came with something a bit different that are the different paradoxes. The different paradoxes or dilemmas that we face when we try to train a new AI model. In that case, some of them are quite popular, like the Polanyi, Moravec, Meno, and the learning dilemmas. I'm going to explain just the first one. Polanyi paradox says that we can know more that we can explain. There's a simple example that used to be used in that field that is like, OK, everyone here knows how to ride a bike. And you start when you are a kid, you start iterating, right? You try an error by try and error, and you learn how to ride a bike. But if you try to teach a robot how to ride a bike, it's quite challenging, right? Because you need to be aware of the context. You need to be aware about how is the current status of the bicycle. You need to be aware of your weight. So many different aspects that for us is like straightforward, but it's extremely difficult to teach a robot how to ride a bike. So that's the Polanyi dilemmas. I'm not going to cover the rest because I'm running out of time. Next one is the eye clock drawing dilemma. That essentially has to do with the data quality. In that case, there's one of those 6 dimensions that is the uniqueness that applies to that technical challenge. And why applies? Essentially because if you try to ask an AI to draw a wall clock that shows a different hour than 10:10, it's going to be impossible at this moment. And the reason why is because the wall clock is overrepresented, showing 10:10 hour. So somehow the AIs, they associate that a wall clock is always showing 10:10. So there's some people trying to work on that, because we know that wall clock can show different hours, but the AI doesn't. So in that case, the data quality matters, and the reason why is because wall clock showing 10:10 is overrepresented on the data that we are feeding with the data that we are feeding the AI's models, right? That's why the data quality matters in that case. Next one is about the energy and the cost. To train a new model is extremely expensive, and also it requires a lot of energy as well. So most of the adversaries cannot train their own models, something that is good for us at this moment. And finally are the hardware restrictions, and probably you are familiar with that. You know that there are some restrictions when you try to export the most advanced GPU models to specific regions, right? So that's the last headwinds that really applies to that field. But why we need to be concerned about the usage of agentic AIs? Because those 4 reasons, at least. The first one is about the no ethical considerations that can take in consideration by the agentic AIs. That's something that is human. Let's say they don't care if they target a hospital, for instance, or if they want to attack, for instance, an electrical, water, or gas station, because if the world ends, they don't care. It's just an agentic AI. So that's something that we used to see that most of the adversaries that we are tracking, they are not willing to attack that kind of targets. That changed with AgenticAIs. Next one is about that it's going to be harder to perform adversary attributions. And the reason why, because most of the aspects that we have in consideration in order to perform those attributions are related to human attitudes, let's say. One could be few comments that we have had to the code, a different language that we use in that code, perhaps because they work in work shift. Imagine that they are working in a different region in the world. So depending on the time of the attack, you can somehow understand if they are working your same work shift or not. And most of the times, those adversaries are asking for help in some specific forums, but the AgenticAIs are not going to ask for help, right? So it's going to be harder to perform those attacks attributions, adversary attributions. Next one are about the emerging capabilities. And essentially, those emerging capabilities are already happening with AIs, but probably we will see more coming when we create swarms of agentic AIs, when you combine different agentics AIs. The reason why is because essentially it's a complex system, and you know that you can see in a complex systems, they may exhibit some capabilities that are not observed in every single part of that complex system. So as a complex systems, they provide or they get different emergent capabilities. And that's something that we expect when they create swarms of agentic AIs. The last one is that probably is the end of the security by obscurity. You know that we have some black boxes. It can be a program, it can be a system, and the security consists that no one knows how it works. And what happens with that is that agentic AI can spend as much time as it needs to disassemble that system, to understand how it works, and to basically find vulnerabilities to exploit in that specific systems. As you know, as I said before, now they are capable to perform reverse engineering, and they have enough time, essentially, to test every protocol vulnerability, and so on and so forth. So that's why we believe that it's the end of the security by obscurity. But why those adversaries are using AIs if they are not, at this moment, getting new techniques to target the victims? So essentially, they are still creating some coding, scripts, tools, but nothing else. Also, they are targeting the users by phishing and so on and so forth. But why then? The reason why is because they want to do more with the same resource. They have the same issue that we have. They don't have enough resource to do what they want to do. So they introduce AI to provide more value to the current work that they provide. Second one is to flatten the learning curve. In that case, once they get a human resource, they want to utilize that resource from the day one. So in order to do that, they introduce AIs. And finally, to get focus on their main goals. Essentially, they don't care about learning a new code. They don't care about learning about a specific domain. Instead of that, they want to win some money, or perhaps they want to get access to a specific system, but they don't care to get new technical capabilities. Instead of that, they are using AIs. And that's the reason why we need to adopt AIs. Exactly because the same reasons. You see at the beginning how a German army looks like. You know that now the armies are introducing drones, and those drones are still being driven by humans. Essentially the same, we think that it's the future for an autonomous SOC. And I wasn't unsure about what means an autonomous SOC. So what it is to ask Charlotte, our AI, about what does it mean, right? And she told me, an autonomous SOC is a SOC that combines advanced automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and human expertise to deliver efficient, scalable security operations where routine tasks are automated while maintaining human oversight for critical decisions and complex scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We don't have time for Q&A, just to stay on time. Can you tell them which booth you're in and if you're available for questions in your booth?
OK, yeah, I'll be there, over there. You can find me in the CrowdStrike booth. See you.
OK, thank you.